Remove that flag. It's a nuisance. The letter from the HOA was cold, bureaucratic. It fined a black gold star widow for the memorial to her husband, comparing her grief to dead plants. But a federal law protects that flag. And the next day, 100 veterans from every branch of service arrived to prove it. Her name was Celeste, a Gold Star widow her husband killed in action, her only comfort a flag flown in his honor. The HOA's fine wasn't just about a violation, it was an erasure of his sacrifice, and it targeted the wrong family. Because when you attack one veteran's memory, you answer to all of them. The question was never if they would respond, but how. Celeste's world ended when the knock came. Two uniformed officers at her door on a Tuesday afternoon. Her husband, Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson, was killed by an IED in Kandahar. The folded flag they handed her was her only tether to the man she loved. She mounted it in a glass-fronted case by her front door, a silent, sacred tribute. For 2 years it was respected. Then the HOA changed management. The new president was Robert Henderson, a retired accountant who saw the world in covenants and bylaws. His first act was a blanket inspection. He drove through the Willow Creek subdivision with a clipboard, noting every infraction. Unapproved paint color on mailbox 7, basketball hoop left at the curb on lot 12, and on lot 22, the Johnson residence, an unauthorized exterior display. The citation arrived in a crisp white envelope. Violation, unapproved permanent exterior fixture. Fine, $200. Remove within 7 days or face $50 daily penalties. Celeste read it 3 times. She called the management office. The receptionist was polite but firm. The rule was clear: no flags, banners, or signs except during federally recognized patriotic holidays, and even then, only for a maximum of 7 days. "But this isn't a decoration," Celeste said, her voice trembling. "It's a memorial for my husband. He was killed in Afghanistan." There was a pause on the line. "I'm very sorry for your loss, ma'am, but the rules don't make exceptions. You'll need to take it down or pay the fine." She appealed in writing. She included a copy of Marcus's DD Form 1300, the casualty report. She included a photo of the flag case. She explained the freedom to display the American Flag Act of 2005. She received a form letter in return. Request for variance denied. The display in question is a constructed case, not a flag flown from a pole, and is therefore considered a permanent structure. Compliance required. Robert Henderson believed in order. The rules were the rules. They protected property values. They maintained a uniform, pleasant aesthetic. In his view, sentimentality had no place in governance. One exception became a precedent, and precedent led to chaos. He had seen it before. One garden gnome led to a lawn full of them. He wrote the second notice himself. This one used the word nuisance. Celeste held the paper under the harsh light of her kitchen, the words blurred. Nuisance. Her grief, her love, her last physical connection to Marcus, a nuisance like a broken gutter or overgrown weeds. The fine was now $450 with accumulated daily penalties. She was a school teacher. She didn't have that money. She felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. This wasn't about a rule. This was about being erased. She called her brother-in-law, Terrence, a former Marine who now ran a veteran support charity. She cried through the story. Terrence listened in silence. When she finished, he said only, "Send me the letters, every one of them." He hung up. Terrence didn't call her back. He started making other calls. He called Mike, an Army Ranger he served with who now worked at the VFW. He called Susan, a Navy veteran and paralegal. He called Javier, who ran the local American Legion post. A single question traveled through the veteran network. "Did you hear what they did to Sarge Johnson's widow?" Within 48 hours, Terrence had a plan, but he needed proof, not of the rule but of the disrespect. He told Celeste to request a formal hearing. The HOA had a monthly meeting in 7 days. "Stand in front of them," Terrence said. "Make them say it to your face. We'll handle the rest." Celeste typed the request with shaking fingers. She received a terse confirmation. She was on the agenda for 7 p.m. Thursday, May 16th. She would have 5 minutes to present her case. She practiced in front of her mirror, but the words caught in her throat. She was preparing to beg for the right to remember her dead husband. Meanwhile, in a VFW hall 3 towns over, Terrence stood before a room of 60 men and women. He projected an image of the HOA's nuisance letter onto a screen. He didn't shout. He spoke quietly, which made it worse. This is what they think of us. After the knock on the door, after the folded flag, after we're gone. This is what they think of our memory. They put a price on it, $200, then they call it trash. A low rumble moved through the room. A Vietnam vet with a cane stood up. "What's the play, Marine?" Terrence showed a photo of the community clubhouse where the meeting would be held, a modest room with capacity for maybe 30 people. "We fill it," Terrence said. "Every seat. We come in uniform, we stand when she speaks. We don't say a word, we just bear witness." The message spread. It moved from formal networks to text chains to Facebook groups for local veterans. A retired Air Force colonel made calls. A Marine Corps gunnery sergeant rallied his peacetime platoon. They weren't going to protest. They weren't going to yell. They were going to attend a meeting as concerned citizens who just happened to have served their country. Robert Henderson prepared too. He reviewed the Covenant, Section 4, Paragraph 2. No flags, banners, pennants, or signs shall be displayed on the exterior of any residence except as expressly permitted. The rule was ironclad. He anticipated emotional appeals. He was ready with the association's legal opinion. The case was a structure. It was not a flagpole. Therefore, the federal law did not apply. He would be firm, but he would be fair. He would allow her 5 minutes, then call for a board vote to uphold the fine. It would be unanimous. Procedure would be followed. The night of the meeting arrived. Celeste wore a simple black dress. She carried her copies of the letters, her hands icy. She parked at the clubhouse and saw the lot was full. Overflow cars lined the street. Her heart sank. A big crowd meant more people to watch her humiliation. She took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. She pulled the door open. The room was silent, and it was filled with blue, dress uniforms, Army greens, Navy whites, Marine Corps blues, Air Force service dress, rows and rows of them. Medals glinted under the fluorescent lights. Not a single seat was empty. Veterans lined the walls, standing at perfect attention. 100 sets of eyes turned to her, not with pity but with a solid, unbreakable respect. Robert Henderson sat at the head table, his pen frozen above his agenda. His face was pale. He looked at the sea of uniforms, then at the widow in the doorway. The gavel in his hand felt suddenly very heavy. The head of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, a man with a chest full of ribbons, leaned forward and spoke softly. "Mr. Chairman, I believe you have a hearing to conduct." The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of 100 witnesses. Robert Henderson cleared his throat, the sound painfully small. "The board recognizes, Mrs. Johnson. You have 5 minutes." Celeste walked to the small lectern, her heels clicking in the quiet. She placed her papers down, smoothed her dress, and looked not at the board but at the veterans. She found Terrence's face, a steady anchor in the sea of blue. "My name is Celeste Johnson. My husband was Marcus Johnson. He joined the Army right out of high school. He served for 15 years. He was on his 3rd deployment when he was killed. This flag." She turned and pointed a steady finger toward the door, as if the case was right there. "This flag is what the government gave me in exchange for my husband. It is not a decoration. It is his shroud. It is the only thing I have left that touched him, and you called it a nuisance." She picked up the HOA letter, her voice gaining strength. "You compared my husband's memory to dead plants. You fined me $450 I do not have for the crime of missing him. I am asking you tonight to see this for what it is, to make an exception for a Gold Star family, to show that this community has a heart, not just a rule book." She sat down. The 5 minutes weren't up, but she had nothing else to say. The room remained silent. Robert Henderson adjusted his glasses. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. The board has reviewed your request for a variance. The covenants, however, are clear. The display is a permanent exterior structure installed without approval. The Federal Flag Act pertains to flags flown on poles, not enclosed cases. To grant an exception would be unfair to every other homeowner who complies. The fines stand. The display must be removed. A low ripple went through the crowd of veterans. No one shouted, but 100 people shifted almost imperceptibly in their seats. The sound of fabric and creaking leather was like distant thunder. Then a man in marine dress blues stood up. He was in his 60s, his bearing rigid. "Point of order, Mr. Chairman." His voice was a graveled bass, accustomed to command. "This is not a public comment period," Henderson said, flustered. "I'm not making a comment. I'm citing Robert's Rules of Order, which your bylaws adopt for meetings. I am a member of this association. I own the home at 118 Spruce Lane. My name is James Thorne, Colonel, United States Marine Corps, retired. I move for a vote of the membership present to override the board's decision and grant Mrs. Johnson a permanent variance." Henderson's mouth opened, then closed. You can't do that, the board manages." "Your bylaws, Article 8, Section 3, Colonel Thorne continued, as if reading from a manual. "A two-thirds majority vote of members present at any meeting can override a board decision on matters of rule enforcement. Do you have a current quorum, Mr. Chairman?" Henderson looked at the board secretary, who frantically flipped through a binder. She nodded, her face white. With this many homeowners present, they had well beyond a quorum. The veterans hadn't just come to watch. They had come to vote. Many of them owned homes in Willow Creek. They were the membership. "Second the motion," a voice called from the back, an Air Force sergeant. Henderson was trapped. Procedure was his fortress, and they had just used his own walls to surround him. "Very well," he said, his voice tight. "We will take a vote. All in favor of overriding the board and granting a permanent variance for the memorial display at Lot 22. 100 hands went up, not just the veterans. Several regular homeowners, moved by the display, raised their hands too. It was a forest of unanimity. "All opposed?" Henderson raised his hand. So did 2 other board members, 3 hands against 100. "The motion carries," he muttered, defeated. But Colonel Thorne wasn't finished. He remained standing. "Now, I move a second motion, to form an immediate committee to review and amend the covenant regarding flag and memorial displays to bring it into compliance with the spirit and letter of federal law, and to explicitly protect the rights of Gold Star families. And I move that Mrs. Johnson be placed on that committee." This too passed in another wave of hands. The takeover was complete, bloodless, and conducted entirely according to the HOA's own rules. The meeting adjourned. The veterans filed out quietly, each one nodding to Celeste as they passed. She was trembling, tears of relief and awe finally streaming down her face. Robert Henderson packed his papers, refusing to make eye contact. He felt a public humiliation so profound it was like a physical wound. But as he drove to his immaculate, rule-perfect home, his humiliation curdled into something else: resentment. He wasn't wrong. The rule was the rule. They had ganged up on him, used emotional blackmail, turned his own meeting against him. This wasn't over. The next morning, Celeste woke up feeling a lightness she hadn't known in years. The flag could stay. She had won. But on her porch was a new envelope. Not from the HOA management company, from a law firm. Henderson and Associates. Robert's brother was an attorney. The letter was dense with legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. The vote was invalid. The motion to override was improperly placed on the agenda. The committee had no authority to change covenants, which required a mail ballot vote of the entire association. Furthermore, the display still violated the original, legally recorded covenants, which took precedence over an improperly conducted meeting vote. The fines were reinstated, effective immediately. And they were adding a new one: $200 for disruption of association business. He had lawyered up. He was going to fight the entire association, and his first move was to punish Celeste even more severely. When Terrence saw the letter, his calm marine demeanor hardened into something dangerous. "This isn't about a flag anymore," he said. "This is about a bully." He made another call, this time to a journalist named Anya Petrova at the Metro newspaper. He didn't ask for a story. He just sent her the original nuisance letter, the legal threat, and a single line. HOA uses lawyer to overturn unanimous vote protecting Gold Star Widows Memorial. Anya was a veteran herself, Army Public Affairs. She saw the story in 10 seconds. It had everything: heart, conflict, a clear villain, and a visual hook, the image of a room full of veterans. She called Celeste for comment, then called Robert Henderson. He refused to speak, citing pending legal matters. That refusal was a quote in her article. The story published online at noon. By 3 p.m., it was trending locally. By 5, national veterans organizations had picked it up. The narrative was perfect: heavy-handed HOA bureaucrat versus grieving military widow. The nuisance line was repeated like a drumbeat. But Robert Henderson wasn't watching Twitter. He was in his brother's office drafting a lawsuit, not against Celeste, that would look terrible, against the HOA board itself for failing to uphold the covenants, a civil action to compel enforcement. He was suing his own association to force them to find Celeste. It was a nuclear option designed to bankrupt the HOA's insurance and force them to capitulate. Anya, the journalist, got a tip about the lawsuit from a clerk at the courthouse. She also did some digging into Henderson's past. She found no military service, which was fine. But she found something else. Property records showed Henderson's company had quietly purchased 3 foreclosed lots in Willow Creek over the past 2 years through an LLC. He was more than a president. He was a developer planning a small expansion. Uniform aesthetics weren't just about taste. They were about maximizing his future profit. She called Terrence with this information. "This is bigger than one fine," she said. "He has a financial stake in being uncompromising. It sets a precedent. If he makes an exception for her, other homeowners might want exceptions that hurt his curb appeal sales pitch." Terrence understood immediately. This was about money. The flag, the memory, the sacrifice, all of it was just collateral damage in a fight over property values and future lots. The veterans had won the battle of public opinion and the meeting hall, but Henderson was playing a different game. A slower, more expensive legal game where the goal wasn't to win hearts, but to drain resources and wait for his opponent to give up. Celeste received the official notice of the lawsuit against the HOA. The association president, now terrified of legal fees, called her. "Mrs. Johnson, we're so sorry, but our hands are tied. If we don't enforce the rule, he sues us and we all pay. Maybe you should just take it down for now, just until this blows over." She felt the ground crumble beneath her again. The unanimous vote, the veterans' support, the public outcry, none of it mattered against the cold machinery of a lawsuit. The legal system moved slowly, and while it moved, the fines would accrue. She could lose her home over this. Terrence saw the despair in her eyes. He called a new meeting. Not at the VFW this time, he invited Anya, the journalist, a sharp-eyed real estate attorney named David Chen who specialized in property law, and Colonel Thorne. They met in Celeste's living room, under the gaze of the folded flag in its case. "This is the playbook," David Chen said, spreading out the lawsuit and covenants. "He uses the rules to bankrupt opposition with legal costs. He's not expecting to win in court necessarily. He's expecting you to run out of money and will first. We need to change the battlefield." Anya nodded. The public story got his attention. Now we need a harder story, the financial stake, the LLC buying lots. We paint the picture. A developer using HOA rules as a weapon to increase his own wealth, starting by targeting a widow. That gets state legislators' attention. That gets the news networks. Colonel Thorne had been silent, staring at the flag case. "There's another front," he said quietly. "The U.S. Code, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act. It says an association may not prevent the display of the flag. It doesn't specify how it must be displayed. His argument about poles versus cases is a technicality a judge might buy or might laugh out of court. We need to force that test. We need to make him defend in open court his interpretation that this, he pointed to the case, is not a display of the American flag. So we don't fight the HOA fine, Terrence summarized. We force him to sue us. We invite the lawsuit. And when he does, we countersue under the federal act. We make it a federal case, literally. Celeste looked around at them. The legal costs I can't afford. David Chen smiled. You won't have to. I've already had 3 calls from senior partners at firms you've heard of. They're offering pro bono representation. This case is now a career maker. Nobody wants to be the lawyer who lost against the Gold Star widow. And the veterans groups have legal defense funds. The money is there. The question is, Celeste, are you ready? This will be ugly. They will dig into your life. They will try to paint you as difficult as seeking attention. It will be in the papers for months. She looked at the flag. She thought of Marcus. She thought of the word nuisance on official letterhead. She straightened her back. Where do I sign? The following week, a formal letter went out from David Chen's firm to Robert Henderson and his brother's law office. It did not contest the fine. Instead, it stated that Celeste Johnson was in full compliance with federal law and would not be removing her display. It invited them to file their intended lawsuit to compel removal, at which point they would vigorously defend under the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 and file counterclaims for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was a legal gauntlet thrown down with precision. They were calling his bluff. The ball was back in Henderson's court, but he didn't see it as a bluff. He saw it as arrogance. He instructed his brother to file the suit. The legal wheels began to turn, slow and grinding. And that's when Anya published her second story. HOA president's financial stake revealed in widow's flag fight. It laid out the LLC, the property purchases, the potential profit from a uniform neighborhood. The public outrage, which had been warm sympathy, turned into cold fury. This was corruption, not pettiness. Emails flooded the HOA board. Homeowners demanded Henderson's resignation. Petitions circulated. The national media, which had briefly picked up the heartwarming vet angle, now latched onto the greedy developer angle. A cable news satellite truck parked outside Henderson's home. Pressure built on all sides. But Robert Henderson, sitting in his home office surrounded by pictures of perfectly manicured neighborhoods, dug in. He was right. He had the law. He had the covenant. He would not be bullied by the mob or the media. His lawsuit would prove it. The first hearing was set. A simple motion to dismiss. His brother assured him it was a formality. The judge would see the clear violation of the recorded covenants and order the flag's removal. Then this would all be over. The night before the hearing, Celeste couldn't sleep. She sat by the flag case, her hand against the cool glass. "I'm so tired, Marcus," she whispered. "I just wanted to honor you. I didn't want a war." The next morning, she put on her black dress again. David Chen met her at the county courthouse. Terrence was there, and Colonel Thorne and 24 veterans in civilian clothes. They filled the benches. Robert Henderson arrived with his brother, avoiding their eyes. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. She called the case. Henderson's brother stood and began his argument about covenants, property values, and the distinction between a flagpole and a structure. He spoke for 10 minutes. Then David Chen stood. "Your Honor, before we address covenants, I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit A." He carried a small, polished wooden box to the clerk. "This is the flag in question. The government-issued burial flag of Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson, provided to his widow, my client. I would ask the court to examine it." The judge looked intrigued, nodded. The clerk opened the box, carefully unfolded the flag partway, its stars and stripes vivid against the dark wood of the courtroom. A hushed reverence fell over the room. Chen continued, his voice soft but carrying. The defendant's entire case rests on the argument that this flag, when displayed in a case, is not displayed under federal law, that only a flag on a pole counts. We contend that is a distinction without meaning, designed solely to harass a grieving family. But beyond that, Your Honor, we wish to introduce new evidence relevant to the plaintiff's motives and the arbitrary nature of this enforcement. He turned and nodded to Anya, who was sitting in the front row. She stood and handed him a file. We have obtained, through public records requests, the compliance history for the Willow Creek HOA for the past 3 years. In that time, 27 separate covenant violations were issued for unapproved exterior displays. Satellite dishes, decorative windmills, oversized holiday inflatables. Of those 27, 26 were resolved after a single warning. Only one violation has ever been escalated to daily fines, threatened with legal action, and subjected to a lawsuit aimed at the entire association. Lot 22, the Johnson residence. He let that hang in the air. The arbitrary enforcement, the targeted harassment. Your Honor, Henderson's brother spluttered. Relevance, the covenant is clear. The judge held up a hand, her eyes on David Chen. Where are you going with this, counselor? Chen took a deep breath. To the plaintiff's state of mind, Your Honor, we believe this enforcement is not in good faith but is malicious, and to that end we wish to call a witness. Not on our list, as we only obtained this information last night. I ask the court's indulgence. The judge raised an eyebrow. Who is the witness? Chen looked directly at Robert Henderson. The plaintiff, Your Honor, Mr. Robert Henderson. We'd like to put him on the stand, right now. The courtroom air crackled. Henderson's own attorney objected. Your Honor, this is a clear ambush. But the judge's eyes were fixed on Robert Henderson, who had gone pale. You open this door, counselor. The witness will take the stand. Henderson rose slowly, smoothing his suit jacket. He took the oath, his voice a dry whisper. David Chen approached, calm and conversational. Mr. Henderson, you're suing your own homeowners association to force them to find Mrs. Johnson, correct? Yes, to enforce the covenants. Those covenants prohibit unapproved permanent exterior fixtures. Is that correct? Yes. You've issued 27 violation notices for exterior fixtures in 3 years. How many resulted in daily fines and legal action? Objection, relevance. Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Henderson. Henderson shifted. 1. The Johnson residence. Why only 1? Because the others complied after a warning. Did Mrs. Johnson not attempt to comply? Did she not request a variance? She requested, it was denied. The rule is clear. Chen picked up a document. Let's talk about the rule. Exhibit D, an email from you to the board last year. You wrote, and I quote, the flag display, while emotionally charged, sets a dangerous precedent for aesthetic exceptions that could impact future lot valuations. Chen looked at the judge, then back at Henderson. Future lot valuations. You own, through an LLC, 3 vacant lots in Willow Creek you intend to develop, correct? Henderson's lawyer was on his feet again. Objection, harassment. This is a covenant case, not a real estate case. The judge peered over her glasses. It seems the plaintiff's financial interest in uniform enforcement is now central to the defense of selective enforcement. I'll allow it. Answer the question. Henderson swallowed. I have investment properties, that's irrelevant. Is it? If you make an exception for a memorial, could you then be asked to make an exception for a differently colored fence, for a non-standard mailbox? And if the neighborhood looks less uniform, could that lower the selling price of your future homes? That's speculation. It's your email, Mr. Henderson. You connected her flag to property values. This wasn't about a rule for the community's good. This was about protecting your personal investment. You targeted a Gold Star widow because she was an easy first test. If you could break her, no one else would dare ask for an exception. Isn't that true? No, that's not true. The rule is the rule for everyone. Chen didn't push. He let the contradiction hang. He switched topics. You called the memorial a nuisance in your letter, comparing it to dead plants. You stand by that word. Henderson straightened. It's a legal term. An unauthorized structure is a nuisance. A nuisance, like a loud dog or junk cars, not like a war memorial. It is not a recognized war memorial. It is a residential display. Chen walked back to the evidence table. He lifted the folded flag from its box, handling it with deliberate reverence. He carried it slowly toward the witness stand. This flag draped the casket of Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson. It was presented to his widow by a uniformed officer of the United States government. Do you see it? Henderson looked away. I see it. Would you call this flag in this box a nuisance? Objection argumentative. Sustained. Chen placed the flag on the clerk's desk. Withdrawn. One final question, Mr. Henderson. The Federal Freedom to Display the American Flag Act. Are you familiar with it? Vaguely. It states that a homeowners association may not prevent the display of the American flag. Do you believe preventing this flag in this case violates that law? Henderson regained some footing. The law refers to display on a pole or staff, not in a permanent glass case. It's a distinction of method. We are not preventing the display of a flag. We are regulating an unauthorized structure. Thank you, no further questions. Henderson stepped down, but the damage was done. The judge had seen it. A man obsessed with control and profit, hiding behind bureaucracy. The hearing concluded with the judge taking the motions under advisement. A ruling would come in writing, she said, within 30 days. Outside the courtroom, Anya was waiting with her recorder. She approached Henderson. Mr. Henderson, any comment on the testimony about your financial interest in the covenants? He brushed past her, his brother lawyer muttering, no comment. But the story was already writing itself. That evening, the headline read, HOA president admits in court, widow's flag could hurt my property sales. The public outrage turned nuclear. Online forums dedicated to HOA reform picked it up. National veterans organizations, previously offering moral support, now pledged financial and legal backing. Donations poured into a fund for Celeste's legal defense, far exceeding the paltry HOA fines. The pressure shifted to the Willow Creek HOA board. They were now defendants in Henderson's lawsuit, facing their own legal fees, and were public villains. They called an emergency meeting without Henderson. In a panic, they voted to settle with Celeste. They would pay her legal fees, drop all fines, and grant a permanent variance. They sent her the agreement. David Chen reviewed it. It's good, he told Celeste, but it only binds the HOA. It doesn't bind Henderson. He can still pursue his private lawsuit against the HOA to force them to fine you. He's a homeowner, he can sue the association independently, and he will. He's too deep in now. He has to win to save face. Sure enough, Henderson refused to drop his suit. The HOA, now allied with Celeste in wanting this to go away, was trapped. The legal monster Henderson created was now consuming everyone. Then the second bomb dropped. It didn't come from a lawyer or a journalist. It came in a plain manila envelope addressed to Celeste, with no return address. Inside were photocopies of bank statements and wire transfers. They showed Henderson's LLC receiving large deposits from a development company called Heartland Builders on the same days key HOA votes on aesthetic restrictions had occurred. The connection was crude but damning. Money flowed in when rules tightened. Anya and Terrence pored over the documents. They were leaked, possibly from a disgruntled business partner or an employee at the title company. They showed Henderson wasn't just a small-time investor, he was a conduit. Heartland Builders wanted to buy and develop entire sections of aging suburbs, modernize them, and sell at a premium. Their model required strict, enforceable aesthetic control. Henderson was their man on the inside, shaping the rules to their future advantage. Celeste's flag was the first domino. If it fell, the precedent of absolute control would be set. The story was no longer about a flag. It was about the hidden financialization of community, where neighborhood rules were weaponized for corporate profit. Armed with this, David Chen went back to the judge with a supplemental brief. He argued Henderson's lawsuit was not in good faith, but was part of a scheme to use the court system to advance a private, paid agenda, a form of legal fraud. He requested the lawsuit be dismissed with prejudice and that Henderson be made to pay everyone's attorney fees. The judge agreed to hear arguments. The hearing was set for 1 week later. The media circus grew. Satellite trucks returned. News networks framed it as a classic American battle, the little guy versus the corrupt system. 3 days before the hearing, Celeste answered her door to find a well-dressed stranger holding a briefcase. "Mrs. Johnson, my name is Alan Price. I represent Heartland Builders. May I come in?" He sat in her living room, polite and apologetic. "We've become aware of certain allegations linking our company to Mr. Henderson's actions. We want to assure you, Heartland had no knowledge of his personal disputes. We are simply investors. This negative publicity is harming our projects in other states. We would like to make this go away." He opened his briefcase. He slid a single sheet of paper across her coffee table. It was a settlement offer, $100,000. In exchange for a full confidentiality agreement, a public statement that Heartland was not involved, and the removal of the flag display. Celeste stared at the number. It was life-changing money. It would pay off her mortgage. It would secure her future. All she had to do was take down the flag, the very thing she had fought for. She felt sick. "He wants me to erase him," she said softly, not to the lawyer but to the empty room. "First with a fine, then with a lawsuit, now with a check." Price adjusted his tie. "It's not erasure, Mrs. Johnson, it's practicality. You win. You get financial security. You can honor your husband in other private ways. This is a victory." She stood up. "Get out." "Mrs. Johnson, please consider." "Get out of my house." He left the offer sheet still on the table. She called Terrence and David Chen immediately. They rushed over. Chen was furious. "This is witness tampering. This is an attempt to buy the outcome of a pending case." He wanted to file it with the judge immediately. Terrence was quieter. He looked at the offer. $100,000. They're scared. This proves the new documents are real. They're trying to kill the story before the hearing. Celeste picked up the paper, tore it neatly in half and dropped it in the trash. "I'm not for sale." The final hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Henderson looked drained, isolated. His own brother lawyer seemed distant. David Chen presented the leaked financial documents and detailed the settlement offer from Heartland Builders. He argued this was a conspiracy to misuse the judicial process for commercial gain. Henderson's lawyer gave a weak defense, claiming Henderson was just a homeowner standing up for rules. The judge listened, her face impassive. After arguments, she did not rule from the bench. She said she would issue a written order. The waiting began again, but the atmosphere had shifted. The truth was out. Henderson was finished in the community, possibly facing ethics complaints. Heartland Builders had withdrawn from their local projects, their reputation stained. A week later, the judge's order landed. 53 pages. She dismissed Henderson's lawsuit against the HOA with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. She found his enforcement was selective, arbitrary, and motivated by improper financial considerations unrelated to the community's welfare. She ordered him to pay the HOA's legal fees and Celeste's legal fees, a sum totaling over $120,000. Most importantly, on the Federal Flag Act, she ruled. The display of the burial flag of Sergeant Johnson in a respectful case by his widow constitutes a display of the American flag protected under federal law. The distinction between a pole and a case is not material to the act's intent. The defendant's motion for summary judgment on this point is granted. Celeste had won, completely. The flag was protected by federal law. The fines were void. The attacker was defeated and bankrupted by his own lawsuit. The community celebrated. The veterans held a quiet barbecue in her honor. The HOA board chastened, passed new covenants the following month, explicitly protecting memorials for fallen service members. Celeste finally felt peace. But as the news vans drove away and the neighborhood quieted down, Terrence pulled her aside. He had one last piece of information, discovered by Anya's relentless digging. "The leaked documents," he said. "We found the source. It was Henderson's own wife. She'd had enough. She wanted it to stop." Celeste nodded, not surprised. Corruption often rots from the inside out. She stood on her porch that evening looking at the flag case, now bathed in the soft glow of a sunset she'd helped secure. The battle was over, but as she turned to go inside, she noticed a new piece of mail. Not a legal document, a simple thank you card. It was from an address she didn't recognize. She opened it. Inside, in careful handwriting, it read, "Thank you for fighting. My HOA told me to take down my son's memorial flag last year. I took it down. I wish I'd had your courage. You fought for all of us." It was signed, "Another Gold Star Mother." Celeste held the card, tears in her eyes. She realized then that her victory wasn't just about her flag or her street or even her town. It was a beacon. It showed that the system, for all its weight and cruelty, could be made to bend toward justice. That sometimes you don't just win your case, you change the game for everyone who comes after. And in that moment, she knew exactly what she had to do next. The fight for the flag was over, but a new fight was just beginning. The thank you card from the other Gold Star Mother didn't leave Celeste's thoughts. She'd won her war, but the letter was proof the battle was everywhere. So she took the one weapon she'd mastered, public attention, and aimed it at a new target, the law itself. She called David Chen and Anya. "The judge said my case is protected, but what about the next widow, or the father who wants to fly a service flag for his son? They shouldn't need 100 veterans and a team of lawyers. The law needs teeth." David agreed. The Federal Flag Act was a good start, but it was vague. It said HOAs may not prevent display, but it didn't stop them from tying homeowners up in fines and lawsuits over technicalities, like the Pole versus Case argument. What was needed was a state law, something with crystal clear language and real penalties for violations. Anya used her platform. She wrote a powerful column titled "The Cost of a Memory," detailing not just Celeste's fight, but the dozens of similar stories her reporting had uncovered. She ended with a call to action. "Our state must pass a Gold Star Family Protection Act." The column caught the eye of State Senator Maria Flores, a veteran whose brother had served. She called Celeste and asked to meet. They sat in the senator's office, Celeste, Terrence, and David Chen. Senator Flores listened to the whole story. She didn't need convincing. "The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act was federal floor," she said. "We need to build a ceiling in this state. A law that says not only can you display the flag, but you can display a Gold Star or Blue Star service flag in a case or on a pole without fear of fines or harassment. And if an HOA violates it, they pay triple damages." She drafted the bill. It was named Sergeant Marcus Johnson's Act. The language was intentionally blunt. It protected any tangible display honoring a service member or veteran, including but not limited to flags, plaques, cases, and temporary markers. It made any attempt to fine or sue over such a display a violation of state consumer protection law. The penalties were severe enough to make any HOA board think twice. The bill needed support. Celeste, who once trembled at a podium, now testified before the state legislature's Veterans Affairs Committee. She didn't talk about legal technicalities. She held up a photo of Marcus. She held up the nuisance letter. She told them about the 100 veterans who showed up. "They didn't come for me," she said. "They came for every family that's ever gotten that knock on the door. This law isn't for me. My fight is done. This is for the next family, so their grief isn't compounded by a citation and a bill." The committee voted unanimously to advance the bill. News followed its progress. It became a bipartisan issue, a rare piece of legislation everyone could agree looked good to support. It passed the state house with 80% approval. It sailed through the Senate. 6 months after Celeste stood in that crowded HOA meeting, the governor signed Sergeant Marcus Johnson's act into law at a ceremony on the Capitol steps. Celeste stood beside him, holding a pen. Veterans in uniform filled the steps, a mirror of that night at the clubhouse. Robert Henderson sold his home in Willow Creek 2 months before the law passed. He moved to another state. The financial and social cost had been too high. His LLC dissolved. The 3 lots were sold to a different developer who built homes without trying to control what residents put on their walls. The new HOA board, led by Colonel Thorne, made the memorial variance permanent for the entire neighborhood and established a community fund to maintain a small memorial garden at the entrance, dedicated to all local service members. The legal fees Henderson was ordered to pay were collected through a lien on his property. Celeste donated every penny of her portion to a charity that provided financial counseling to Gold Star families. She said, "I didn't fight for a paycheck. I fought for respect. This money can help others who are fighting harder battles than an HOA." Anya won a prestigious journalism award for her coverage. David Chen's firm saw a surge in referrals. Terrence's veteran support charity expanded, adding a legal aid hotline for service members dealing with housing disputes. But the most profound change was in Celeste. The quiet, grieving teacher found a voice. She started a small nonprofit working with Anya and David to advise other families facing similar HOA disputes. They created a simple toolkit, a copy of the federal law, the new state law, template appeal letters, and instructions on how to contact local veteran groups. They called it the Flag Protocol. One afternoon, a year after the law passed, she got a call. A man in a neighboring state, a Gold Star father, was being told to take down a memorial stone for his daughter in his front yard. His HOA called it an unapproved hardscape. He'd found Celeste's story online. She walked him through the steps. She connected him with a veterans advocate in his area. She sent him the toolkit. 2 weeks later, he called back, his voice thick with emotion. The HOA had backed down. The local VFW post had paid a visit. The stone stayed. Celeste hung up and looked at Marcus's flag. It was no longer just a memory. It was a standard, a symbol that had rallied a community, changed a law, and was now helping people she'd never met. The weight of her grief hadn't lessened, but it had been joined by a sense of purpose. She had taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and forged it into a tool to protect others. On the next Memorial Day, Willow Creek did something new. At the entrance to the neighborhood in the new memorial garden, they held a short ceremony. Every home that wanted to participate was given a small American flag on a yard stake. As Colonel Thorne read the names of the fallen from their community, residents walked out and placed their flags along the curb. By the end, the streets were lined with a rippling avenue of red, white, and blue. It was voluntary. No fines. No citations. Just respect. Celeste stood at the end of her walkway watching the street transform. Her own flag, in its case, was visible in the window behind her. A woman from down the street, someone she'd never really spoken to, walked over. "I never said I'm sorry," the woman said, "for what we let happen, for not speaking up sooner." Celeste smiled. "You showed up when it mattered," she said. The story of the 100 veterans had become local legend, but the quieter, longer story was the change it wrought. A neighborhood learned that some rules are meant to be broken. A state learned to write better ones. And a widow learned that love doesn't just live in memory. It can be a force that shapes the world. As the sun set on that Memorial Day, the flags casting long shadows, Celeste knew this was the true victory. Not in a courtroom ruling or a signed law, but in the simple, unchallenged right to remember. The nuisance had been silenced. The honor remained. And it would for as long as she lived and long after. The fight was over. The work, however, had just begun. The story of Celeste Johnson and the 100 veterans reminds us that the battle for memory is fought in quiet neighborhoods, not just on distant battlefields. It asks a question that echoes far beyond any HOA meeting room. What do we truly owe those who served and those they left behind? We live in a country of 75 million people governed by homeowners associations. Rules about paint colors, lawn height, and fence heights are one thing. But when those rules clash with sacred remembrance, when a folded flag becomes a violation, we have to ask what kind of communities we're building. Are they about uniformity, or are they about humanity? The federal law protecting the flag was passed in 2005, but laws on paper are only as strong as the people willing to stand behind them. In this case, it wasn't just one widow. It was a network, a Marine brother-in-law, a journalist veteran, a retired colonel who knew parliamentary procedure, a lawyer who saw a bigger fight, and 100 silent witnesses in dress uniforms who transformed a meeting from an enforcement action into a moral tribunal. That's the real lesson here. Systems of control rely on isolation. They target one person, counting on the fact that no one else will want the trouble. But when the community refuses to let one member stand alone, when they show up not with anger but with silent, overwhelming presence, the calculus of power changes instantly. Celeste's flag is still there, and because of her fight, flags and memorials for other fallen heroes are staying up in neighborhoods across her state, protected by a new law that bears her husband's name. Her grief became a shield for others. That is the ultimate repayment of a debt we can never fully settle. We end with a final, surprising detail. That HOA president, Robert Henderson, never issued a public apology, but 6 months after moving away, he mailed a cashier's check for $5,000 to the veterans' charity Celeste supports. There was no note, just the check. Sometimes change doesn't come with an admission but with an action, and sometimes that has to be enough. So the next time you see an American flag or a gold star banner in a window, remember that it's more than fabric. It's a story. It's a life. It's a love that outlasts death. And it's a declaration that some things, duty, sacrifice, memory, are beyond the reach of any rule book. If you found this story of courage and community powerful, make sure to subscribe. We bring you untold stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and the moments when justice finds a way. Your subscription supports this channel and helps us share more narratives that matter. Thanks for watching.